Hi, you're watching Reddit Confessions. I never thought a plain white envelope could feel like a loaded weapon. But there it was, sitting dead center on our piano, tilted just enough to catch my eye as I walked in from the garage. My hands were still greasy from fixing the lawnmower, but the second I saw it, I knew. I just knew. It wasn't addressed. No name, no sticker, just sealed. Sitting there like it had been waiting decades to ruin me. I called out, "Marla!" No answer. The house was too quiet. It's always quiet lately, but this was a vacuum. The kind of silence that hums in your ears. I peeled off my gloves, walked over, and picked it up. It was heavier than I expected. Inside, 4 sheets of handwritten paper, front and back. Her handwriting, careful, neat, and cold. The first line read, "You deserve to know everything before I go." My heart fell through the floor. She hadn't left a note in 37 years. She barely left grocery lists. But here it was, a farewell. Not the kind where someone dies. The kind where someone leaves. Willingly, as I read, my knees buckled. I sat down right there on the piano bench. I felt old, stupid, like the last guy at the party who doesn't realize the music stopped hours ago. She wrote about 1988, 1994, 2003. She named places, events, men. One of them I knew. One of them had been in our wedding photos. Another, a neighbor from 2 streets over, the guy who helped us after the basement flood. The details weren't vague. They were surgical, like she needed me to feel every betrayal precisely. And then she dropped the worst part. It never stopped, Delton. Even last year. Especially last year. Last year was our vow renewal. I remember holding her hand, thinking foolishly that we'd made it through every storm, that we were the lucky ones. She smiled at me that day like I was her whole world. But according to this letter, she had spent that same weekend at a hotel after the ceremony. Not alone. There were no apologies, no explanations, just facts, like she was emptying a drawer. At the bottom of the last page, in small print, "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just couldn't lie to you anymore. I'll be gone before you wake up." Except I had woken up early. I walked into this house expecting to mow the lawn, not lose the last 37 years of my life in 4 pages of ink. And I haven't moved since. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe an hour. Maybe 4. The letter was still clenched in my hands, crumpled at the edges from how tightly I was holding it. I didn't cry. Not at first. My mind was too tangled, looping through every year, every birthday, every time she'd kissed me goodnight while carrying this secret. What was real? What was performance? Was I ever anything more than her backup plan? Eventually, I stood up like an old man learning to walk again. My legs were numb, my chest tight. I wandered through the house like I was in someone else's life. The kitchen was spotless. Too spotless. Like she'd cleaned every trace of herself. The fridge still had the leftovers from last night's dinner. The one she cooked while knowing she was going to vanish. That's what killed me. She made pot roast, my favorite, and then she left me to rot in the silence. I noticed small things missing. Her toothbrush, her favorite coffee mug with the chipped rim, the one she swore she'd never throw out. The green scarf I bought her in Maine was gone from the coat rack. Even the painting from her side of the bedroom wall had been taken down. Not everything, but just enough to remind me that I'd been chosen for abandonment. I finally checked the garage. Her car was gone. Not a surprise. But what hit me harder was that she'd taken the emergency bag we kept in the trunk. The one with cash, clothes, our spare IDs. I had packed that thing myself years ago, just in case we ever needed to leave in a hurry. I thought we'd use it together. She used it to escape me. I kept pacing the house like a broken Roomba. I kept thinking I'd find her somewhere. Maybe crouched behind the bed, laughing, saying it was all a test, that she didn't mean it, that she was sick, or tired, or possessed. Anything other than the truth. She had been preparing this for months, quietly, calculated, and deliberately. Then I found the second envelope. It was in her dresser drawer, hidden under old scarves and expired perfume samples. This one was thinner. Just one page. It wasn't for me, it was addressed to someone else. Marcus, I'm finally doing it. I left him, like we always talked about. I dropped the letter. My ears rang. My stomach turned. I stumbled back and nearly knocked over the lamp. Marcus? Who the hell was Marcus? Was he the most recent one? Was he the one from the vow renewal trip? She hadn't just left me. She'd run to someone else. A new life. A fresh start. And she took the time to leave him a love letter while leaving me nothing but a confession signed with guilt. I collapsed on our bed, or what used to be our bed. Felt unfamiliar now, like it had never been mine. I stared at the ceiling, and that's when the tears finally came. I cried the way a man cries when he realizes his whole life had been a setup for a punchline he never saw coming. And then, through my tears, I noticed something odd. The closet door was slightly open, and inside was a small metal lockbox. One she never let me touch. I got up. My hands were shaking. I opened it, and inside was the real bombshell. The lockbox wasn't large, maybe the size of an old shoebox, but it felt heavy in my hands, like it carried years of deception sealed under metal. The key was still taped underneath, where she always kept it, hidden in plain sight. I hesitated. My fingers hovered over the latch as a small voice in my head begged me not to open it. As if somehow, not knowing what was inside could preserve a sliver of the world I once believed in. But I had already lost everything. What else could she possibly take from me? I opened it. There were no bundles of cash, no passports, nothing dramatic at first glance. Just envelopes, photos, and a small velvet pouch. I reached for the pouch first, thinking it might be jewelry, maybe something she didn't want to leave behind. Instead, I found a gold ring. But it wasn't hers. It wasn't mine either. It had initials carved inside. M+L. I froze. As in Marcus? I dropped the ring like it burned me. My hands fumbled through the box, desperate to understand. Beneath it, I found a bundle of printed emails, some with entire threads highlighted in yellow. I skimmed the dates. The earliest one was from 2004. 21 years ago. Their affair wasn't recent. It was long, deep, old enough to vote, and I had never once suspected it. One of the emails read, I dream of waking up beside you someday, not sneaking off to motel rooms, not lying to my kids or pretending to love a man I don't respect. I want to be yours, fully. The words made my skin crawl. Pretending to love a man she didn't respect. Was that what I was? A placeholder? A paycheck? A fool playing house while she was living a double life? There was more. Photos. Smiling. Arms around each other. At places we had once visited as a family. At a lake house I never knew we'd paid for. And receipts. Tucked neatly in envelopes. Labeled by year. She had tracked every expense. Every hotel room. Every gift she'd bought him with our joint account. Then I found one final envelope at the bottom of the box. This one wasn't addressed. I opened it, and inside was a handwritten note, clearly recent. The ink wasn't even fully dried. If you find this, Delton, it means I didn't get far enough. It means I failed to keep this part hidden. But I need you to understand you were safe, predictable, kind. But I needed more than kindness. I needed to feel alive again. Marcus made me feel that. And I'm sorry that I couldn't say goodbye in person. I knew you'd ask questions I couldn't answer without breaking you. She ended it with, please don't come looking for me. There's nothing left for you in my new life. I sat on the floor beside the closet, my legs folded like a child who'd just been punished. That sentence echoed in my head. There's nothing left for you. It wasn't just a goodbye. It was an erasure, like I had been the commercial break in her real story. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. The bed was haunted. The walls felt foreign. The pictures on the mantel mocked me. I couldn't look at our wedding photo without wondering what she had been thinking that day. Was she already planning her exit? Was Marcus already in the background then, just waiting for the right moment? The next morning, I got up, packed a single bag, and drove with no destination. I needed air. I needed distance. But no matter how far I drove, the truth sat beside me like an unwanted passenger. And just when I thought I'd hit emotional bottom, I got a phone call. A blocked number. A deep voice. Delton? We need to talk about Marla. She's not who you think she is. I didn't answer right away. The voice on the other end didn't repeat itself. It just hung there in the silence, heavy and certain. My hand trembled as I brought the phone closer to my ear. Who is this? I asked, my voice cracking like old wood. I was parked in a rest stop 3 hours from home, trying to convince myself I wasn't unraveling. And now some mysterious voice was dragging me further into the unknown. I knew Marla, intimately. Not like you think, the man said. We were friends. For a time. But I saw sides of her that don't fit in your little memory box. I saw what she was capable of. And I thought you should know the full story, not just the one she told you in that letter. My throat dried up. What do you mean, capable of? I mean, he said carefully, she's not with Marcus. At least not anymore. A cold wave moved through me. I had assumed she ran to him, that they were building their fantasy life somewhere tropical, laughing over drinks while I was picking up the broken pieces. But the man kept talking. She used people, Delton. Marcus wasn't her first, and I doubt he'll be her last. She burns bridges once they stop being useful. You just lasted longer than the rest. I asked his name, but he refused to give it. That's not important, he said. What matters is that I was once where you are. Heartbroken, confused, digging through lies, trying to find something true. He gave me an address. A storage unit on the outskirts of Davenport, a town I hadn't visited in over 20 years. Unit 17C, he said. You'll want to bring gloves. Then he hung up. At this point, I had nothing to lose. My life was already a scorched field. So I drove. For hours. I didn't eat. Didn't stop. I barely blinked. I just let the road pull me toward whatever answers waited at the end of it. When I reached the storage facility, it was nearly dark. The place was eerie, rows of units stretching out like coffins in a graveyard. I found 17C. The padlock was broken, dangling like someone had pried it open not long before. I hesitated. What the hell was I walking into? But then I pushed the door open. Inside was chaos. Boxes stacked to the ceiling, dusty furniture covered in sheets, suitcases, plastic bins. I spotted a trunk in the corner locked, but the key was taped to the side. I opened it, and there it was, a collection of IDs, dozens, different names, different addresses, all with photos of Marla. In one, she was Lisa. In another, Helen Granger. Some were expired. Some looked recently issued. My stomach twisted. This wasn't about cheating anymore. This was something else entirely. There were notebooks, too, all handwritten, full of lists, names, dates, payments. It looked like ledgers. Some entries had check marks. Some had red excess. And in one of the notebooks, under the header 2017 Final Phase, was a name I recognized, Marcus Lang. And next to it, a red X. I backed out of the unit, heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't process it. Who was my wife? Was she running cons? Was she targeting men for something beyond love? I returned to my car and sat there for an hour, reading page after page. I learned more about Marla in that dusty storage unit than I had in 37 years of marriage. And when I got to the last page of the final notebook, I nearly dropped it. Written at the bottom in all caps. Next, D. Moyers Endgame. That was me, Delton Moyers. My full name, underlined, labeled as an endgame. Suddenly, it wasn't just betrayal. It felt like a setup, plan. And I had no idea how far it went, or how close I was to the real reason she left. I spent the night in a motel that reeked of mildew and cigarettes, the kind of place people disappear into. Couldn't sleep. I just sat on the edge of the bed, flipping through Marla's notebooks until the sun bled through the stained curtains. Every page whispered that my entire life had been built on sand, and the tide was finally pulling it all away. My name, Delton Moyers, was written in several places. under Endgame, in a section marked Exit Strategy, and, most disturbingly, next to a word I couldn't make sense of at first, transfer. What was she planning to transfer? Property? Money? Identity? I'd lived simply. We didn't have offshore accounts or hidden real estate. Or, at least I didn't. By noon, I drove back to my house. I wasn't ready, but I had to return eventually. I needed documents. Clarity. Something. I stepped inside like a man breaking into his own life. The place was just as I left it. Clean, quiet, hollow. But now everything had a shadow. The wedding photo on the mantel felt like evidence. The live, laugh, love sign in the kitchen mocked me. I went straight to Marla's office, a room I never bothered with. It had always been her space, filled with file cabinets, receipts, and her endless lists. She liked order. Now I knew why. In the bottom drawer, I found a manila folder labeled Legacy. My heart pounded. Inside were legal papers, documents I didn't remember signing, and some I definitely hadn't. One stood out. A power of attorney form, forged with my name on it. Notarized. Stamped. Dated 2 years ago. Suddenly, I understood. The accounts. The withdrawal limits. The conversations I thought were just financial housekeeping. Marla had been setting the stage to take everything. Not just emotionally, but legally. My accounts. My assets. Even my pension. I checked online. Logged into my bank. My stomach dropped. One of the savings accounts we'd opened 20 years ago was drained. Completely empty. I hadn't even noticed because I rarely touched it. It was supposed to be for emergencies. For us. For retirement. Gone. I started trembling. Anger and shame collided inside me. I wasn't just a betrayed husband. I was a target. A mark. And I'd made it easy for her. Every time I looked away, trusted her, handed over a signature without reading the fine print. She'd used it. I was pacing the living room, trying to breathe, when the doorbell rang. I froze. No one ever came by unannounced. Slowly, I approached the door and opened it. A young woman stood there, maybe late 20s, nervous. Her eyes flicked past me into the house. "Are you Mr. Moyers?" she asked. "Yes." She handed me an envelope and swallowed hard. "I don't want to get involved, but I think she used me too." Before I could ask anything, she walked away quickly, nearly jogging to her car. I stood in the doorway, stunned, staring at the envelope in my hand. Inside was a letter. No greeting, just a single sentence in familiar handwriting. "You should have read the signs. You were never part of the plan." And under that, a receipt. For a storage unit. A second one. Different location. Different city. Paid in cash, 6 months ago. She was still out there. Still moving. And somehow, I was the final piece in whatever she was building. I drove to the second storage unit like a man heading toward a landslide, knowing full well he wasn't coming back the same. It was in a quiet suburb 2 hours west, in a facility that looked newer, cleaner, the kind of place professionals used, not drifters. When I handed the clerk the receipt, he didn't blink. "Unit 44B, he said. "Been paid 6 months in advance." Lady came in, said she was storing collectibles. Fragile stuff. He handed me a key. I stood there a moment too long, hoping he might say more, maybe even warn me, but he just gave a tight smile and moved on. I walked down the hallway, every footstep echoing in the sterile silence. When I found the unit, I paused with the key hovering in the lock. I half expected to find nothing, or worse, something that would finally break me. The door creaked upward, and I stood there frozen. It wasn't chaos this time. It was deliberate. Everything was neatly arranged. Boxes stacked by size, a folding table in the center, and pinned to the back wall. A massive corkboard covered in strings, photos, notes. My face stared back at me from 3 different angles, in photos I never knew existed. One of them was taken last year, inside my office at City Hall. Pinned beside my photo was Marla's. Then Marcus. Then a dozen others, all connected by red thread like some twisted conspiracy web. A cold sweat ran down my spine. I stepped closer. Most of the names I didn't recognize, but some I did. A retired councilman. A former neighbor who'd mysteriously moved away. A woman named Lily whose disappearance made local news 10 years ago. Marla had notes under each photo. Traits, patterns, weaknesses. Under mine it read, emotionally passive, predictable, loyal, fully compliant. That last part, fully compliant, rattled me more than anything else. I'd never thought of myself that way, but it was true. I had been so trusting, so routine, that she never even had to try hard to deceive me. In the corner, I noticed a file cabinet with a lock. I used the same key from the front door, and it clicked open. Inside were legal documents, not just mine but records belonging to other men. Some dead, some missing. Social security numbers, marriage licenses, life insurance policies. And then, tucked inside a folder labeled pending, I found a death certificate. Mine. My hands started shaking uncontrollably. It was dated 2 months from now. My full name. Cause of death. Cardiac failure. There was a forged signature at the bottom from a physician I'd never heard of. That was it. The endgame. She wasn't just stealing my money. She was planning to erase me. Legally. I staggered back, knocking into the table. Papers scattered. Among them, I spotted a photo that made my knees buckle. It was me, asleep, in my own bed. The timestamp in the corner? 3 weeks ago. She had been in the house. After the letter. After she left. She had come back. Watched me sleep. I stumbled out of the unit, heart pounding in my throat. Couldn't breathe. I drove to the nearest parking lot and sat there, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Again. A single text came through. You were supposed to go quietly. I stared at the screen, then looked up at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't recognize the man staring back at me, and for the first time in my life I wasn't just heartbroken. I was terrified. I didn't go home that night. Couldn't. I booked a different motel under a fake name and paid in cash. The kind of place where the clerk doesn't ask questions. Every shadow looked like her. Every noise outside made me flinch. Sleep didn't come. I just sat on the edge of the bed, reading the death certificate over and over, like it might dissolve into fiction if I stared long enough. But it was real. All of it. The planning. The photos. The forged documents. And now that text. You were supposed to go quietly. She wasn't just trying to ruin me. She wanted me gone. By sunrise, I had made a decision. I returned to the second storage unit. Something in my gut told me I'd missed something. There was no way she'd go through the trouble of forging legal documents, stalking me, building this elaborate system, and leave it all so exposed. She was smart. Too smart. I combed through everything again. Slower this time. I looked inside every box, under every sheet of paper, behind the corkboard. That's when I found it. A small black cassette tape wedged behind a stack of labeled folders. No markings. No case. Just dust and time. I didn't even own a tape player anymore, but the facilities office had one. An old stereo system sitting on a shelf behind the clerk's desk. I slipped him $20 and said I needed 5 minutes alone. He didn't care. I shut the office door and popped the tape in. There was static at first. Then a voice. Hers. She was talking to someone. Not me. It wasn't a confession. It was a conversation. One she clearly didn't know was being recorded. Marcus got emotional, she said. Started asking questions I didn't like. That's why I had to end it early. He wasn't part of the long game. Then silence. Another voice. A man's. Deep and careful. And Delton? He'll fold on his own, she said. He's soft. He still thinks love means something. Poor man wakes up every day thinking he matters. But once the paperwork's in place, once the final steps are done, well, there won't be much of him left to fight. I hit stop. My fingers were ice. It wasn't just manipulation. It was cruelty, intentional, methodical cruelty. She had studied me, mapped me like a machine, and now she was executing whatever final steps she thought I'd never survive. I sat there in that office chair, staring at the stereo like it had just handed me my own obituary. Then I realized something else. Marcus hadn't simply been discarded. He had asked questions. He had gotten too close to the truth. And now he was gone. Maybe the red X in her notebook wasn't symbolic. Maybe it was literal. I took the tape, the forged documents, and a handful of Marla's notes and drove straight to the police. I didn't care how insane it sounded. I wasn't going to wait around for cardiac failure to mysteriously show up in my near future. The officer at the front desk blinked when I dumped everything on the counter. He gave me that polite smile they reserve for unstable men with wild stories. But I insisted, and after a few minutes, someone higher up came to speak with me. They took the tape seriously, especially after running the names I mentioned through their system. Turns out Marla or Lisa or Helen or whoever she was pretending to be had several former associates listed in missing persons reports over the last 2 decades. They kept me for hours, asked dozens of questions, photocopied everything. And then the detective leaned forward and said something that chilled me. "If everything checks out, Mr. Moyers, you may have just walked in on something much bigger than you realize." The following days were a blur of interviews, paperwork, and investigators dissecting every corner of Marla's secret life. I gave them everything: the tapes, the notebooks, the fake documents, even the death certificate with my name on it. For once, someone believed me. They connected her to 3 separate identities in different states, and 2 of the missing persons listed in her files were confirmed as ongoing cold cases. Suddenly, it wasn't just my life that had been infiltrated. There were families, entire lives, affected by whatever game she'd been playing. It turned out Marcus had filed a missing persons report weeks before she left me. He had told a friend he feared for his safety after trying to end things with her. That friend, a man named Nolan, came forward once the case made headlines. He had recordings, too, notes, things Marcus had confided before he disappeared. Everything began to fit, like puzzle pieces finally dropping into place. Then, one morning, I got a call. The police had found her. Marla was caught crossing into Canada using a fake passport. She had dyed her hair, changed her name again, and was carrying 5 different IDs. But they got her. They brought her back in handcuffs. I didn't attend the arraignment, but I watched the footage on the news. She looked so calm, like someone walking to the grocery store instead of a courtroom. She never looked into the camera. In the end, she was charged with identity fraud, attempted insurance fraud, and obstruction in multiple investigations. There may be more charges coming. She's facing decades. But for me, it's over. Or maybe it's just beginning. In the weeks since, I've started putting my life back together. I closed our old accounts, changed every password, moved to a smaller place near my daughter, and even adopted a dog. His name is Hank. He growls at shadows but sleeps with his head on my foot. Somehow, I trust him more than I ever trusted her. And here's the strange part. I'm grateful. Not for the betrayal, but for the clarity. I spent 37 years trying to love someone who was never real. Now, I finally get to figure out who I am without her. The scars are there, but so is the peace. I walk every morning. I listen to jazz again. I sleep better. And when I pass by mirrors, I no longer see the man she wanted to erase. I see the man who survived her. That's the end of my story. If you've ever experienced something that shook your life to the core, whether it was betrayal, a second chance, or a truth you didn't want to hear, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. What part of this story hit you hardest? What would you have done? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join the conversation here on Reddit Confessions, where the truth finally gets told.